So welcome back, everyone. We have another round of presentations. My name is Orla Shortall. I'm a social scientist, part of EPIC at the James Hutton Institute. So the format this time is a little bit different. We'll have 4 presentations of 20 minutes each, and then immediately after, 10 minutes of questions. So first up, we have Jess Enright and her presentation, Horizon Scanning for the Future, the Role of AI and Other Technology in One Health. So please welcome Jess.
Yes, I'm Jess Enright. I'm based at the University of Glasgow. I first moved to Scotland to work for EPIC, and so I'm really excited to be back at this meeting, seeing lots of old and new friends. Now, this talk is about horizon scanning and about AI, and I can pretend some expertise in AI and not so much in horizon scanning. So I had to do a lot of reading, which is suitable for my job, to learn a lot about both of these. And I'm going to talk to you about kind of what I found. All right, so horizon scanning. Lots of people here know a ton more about horizon scanning and how you do it than I do, but I thought for those of you who might be as ignorant as me, I would give you a little primer on what I read. Now, I should also say, and I'll get to more detail about this in a minute, I've got just a ton of AI-generated images here. And I could not be more happy that we have an actual artist here as well. That fills me with joy, right? And I've kept them in, and I have some rules about them, and I'll mention them at the end of this slide. But what I wanted to say is horizon scanning. Like, what is this and why do we do it? Well, so the idea here is to get kind of some systematic method for gaining foresight of what's coming in the future. And when I was reading this left me with a lot of questions. I tried to read a lot about how people do this. What are we scanning for? How are we doing this? Are there any success stories? Because I thought, fantastic, I'm going to find some case studies of really successful horizon scanning, preferably in veterinary epidemiology, but I'll take anything. And I really just didn't have a lot of luck doing this, which didn't fill me with optimism. But I nevertheless kind of persisted, right? Okay, so my talk plan then is to tell you a bit about what I have found in this reading, what some AI people that I talked to last week think about how AI might contribute to One Health in the future. And then if we have time at the end, have some little scenarios to talk about to kind of, be properly sci-fi and really get the room on fire. Now, I mentioned I have a lot of AI images. These are 2 of them. Okay, so I had some rules here. One was that I looked up how much sort of carbon cost it took to make these images, and I limited myself to 1 kettle boil worth of carbon cost in making images for this talk. This has both the benefit and detriment that they're not great images. So yes, like, come for the opinions, stay for the bonkers pictures that don't make any sense. So you'll see them throughout. I'll try and signpost really clearly when these are AI images and when they're not, but you can probably tell. To give you some history, this is the first image that I made, and I decided to make a follow-up image. So that first one on the far side away from me, I asked it for something to do with sheep and horizon scanning, and this is what it gave me, which I thought was kind of all right. And then I thought, that's a bit boring, and I said, can you add an adversarial cow? Right, because I thought that might be fun. And inexplicably, there's a very unadversarial-looking cow in the background, and the sheep has acquired robot legs. Right? So I thought you can enjoy both of those. This is the standard you can expect from the remainder of this talk. All right. Okay, so what are we scanning for? This is another AI-generated image where I asked it to remove duplicates, and it just continued to introduce additional duplicates of different things. Okay, so I think for us, we're probably scanning for new-to-us diseases, which I think is not necessarily what I'm talking about mainly today. That's what I mostly see. New-to-us diseases, changes in systems that will change the type of disease that we get, changes related to climate change, agricultural practice, policy, public opinion, these things, all of these drivers can really change the vulnerability of our agricultural systems to disease. I think we're also horizon scanning here for changes to modeling methods, data, how AI is used, how it's used in our wider society, and what that means, I guess, for us in our particular field. All right, so I've highlighted this type of changes in the global landscape of data and disease surveillance. I've highlighted in bold because it's something that I think we need to be scanning for, that I'm particularly concerned about right now, but that I'm not really talking about today. I would not have had on my bingo card last year that the US essentially stops doing disease surveillance, but someone obviously did, didn't they? So I think we do need to be aware when we're watching for these things and thinking towards the future of what on a global, kind of global landscape we'll see of increases and decreases in different national capacities for disease surveillance and whose responsibility those things are. I'm not talking about that, but I think it's really important. And I think it's likely to be really important in the nearer future than lots of the things that I'm going to talk about. All right. I should mention people scan for lots of things, right? In my wider reading of the horizon scanning literature, there is a journal that's just called Foresight by the way, which is an excellent journal title. They scan for all of the things they care about. So we scan for the things we care about, but people do horizon scanning kind of across the piece. Financial settings, changes in geopolitics. I have some friends that work more on the defense side of things. They do a lot of horizon scanning, as you might expect. Climate people, market trends, so just people who are looking to make cool new trousers. They do horizon scanning for what's coming next. Demographic trends, all of these things. So essentially anything that somebody cares about, probably somebody is doing some sort of thing that they're calling horizon scanning to look about what's coming. Right? Oh, this I should mention is also an AI-generated image. I'm sure nobody is surprised by that fact. Not as entertaining, but I also didn't want to waste my kettle boiling time on making them more entertaining either. Except for the next slide, well, not this one, but you'll see very soon. These are real images, not made by AI, but adapted from the UK Futures Toolkit. These particular ones are taken from Dow Jones, who made really kind of pretty-looking versions of them that I took. And what I want to address here, and what they were talking about in the article that I took these from, is what the right scales are for scanning, both in magnitude of change and in time. So there's this, I think, really perhaps not very informative, but frequently used figure here on this side, where they're saying essentially there are these different temporal scales. So you might have things that have a higher impact kind of now, and they are near future things, or you might have things that are kind of in the middle horizon, and then things that are farther in the future. So I don't think these lines are especially adding a lot of meaning here, but this is essentially saying kind of trends will become more impactful at different times, and the signal with which you can see them will vary. So things that are about to cause a problem for a month from now, often we can see some sign of. Things that are going to be a problem 50 years from now, perhaps we've no sweet clue, right? So there are these different horizons. And I think people generally think of horizon scanning as not this next year horizon, because that's not really the horizon, that's just the next field over. When they're more thinking about kind of, they're not thinking about 1,000 years in the future, they're kind of thinking about, you know, a couple decades, 5 to 30 years in the future. Right? All right, but I also wanted to mention the magnitude of change here, and particularly this is because I'm talking about AI. I think, you know, when you're considering these big changes, climate, AI, there are things that are so extreme that they kind of fall outside of our remit, right? Like if we're thinking about the impact of AI on One Health and veterinary epidemiology, I don't really, I mean, is it useful for me to horizon scan and think about a world where, you know, like humans no longer work at all, or we just don't have agriculture because we grow meat in vats or are all vegetarian or whatever. Those are probably outside the envelope of useful things to plan for, right? So I'm going to say if Britain is uninhabitable, then I have bigger problems than you know, blue tongue, right? So I want to kind of constrain us, you know, and we push a little bit against this maybe at the end of this talk, but I want to constrain us to sort of futures that are actionably useful to think about in some way, and that was a really difficult thing to do for me. Okay, so how do people do this kind of thing? This is also an AI-generated image. I was getting a bit bored with that last world one, and so I said, could you make it a bit surreal? And this is what it produced. It gave me a description. This is a Dali-inspired surreal version of the scene you described, and it has a slightly bonkers description of what's going on. Okay, but how do people do this sort of horizon scanning thing? And I am not at all a social scientist, and I'm very glad that I have social scientist colleagues, because to me, as an outsider, what this looks like is varying levels of structured versions of kind of asking people what they think. But I've tried to list some of the ways that I found that people do this kind of horizon scanning. So small group expert judgment in various ways, workshops, Delphi method, that sort of thing. Scenario workshops, which I am a big fan of personally, and have done some with Epic. I saw some more slightly out there things that I put on here, super forecasting style stuff. So this is where you just have this vast population of people with essentially no knowledge about this particular question, and you just say, right, knowledge of the crowd, right, wisdom of the crowd, what do you think is going to happen in the next 50 years? And you ask these, you know, thousands of people or whatever, what it is, and this is, I don't know, sometimes effective. It's hard to assess the effectiveness of this kind of thing on a longer time scale on account of it hasn't existed that long, but I'm sure we'll get there. There are other, I mentioned secret methods. So I asked some friends who I know work in kind of other sectors, you do horizon scanning? Yeah, we do. What do you do? Can't talk about it, right? So probably, I only assume that their methods are amazing and that we just don't know about them, but I suspect they're similar, right? I also asked a couple of people, and increasingly I'm seeing people reply, I ask an LLM. So type into a chatbot, what do you think is going to happen 20 years from now, right? So I thought that was kind of cool and meta, but this is a thing that apparently people are doing, right? And so there are all these different methods, and I couldn't do any of these myself in the last kind of couple of weeks in preparing for this. Well, I guess I could and did talk to LLMs. But I wanted to highlight these in case we want to, or someone in this room wants to do a more kind of structured version of this in the future. Because there are some reports, horizon scanning reports out there already in areas that are relevant to One Health, right? And we're certainly seeing impact from AI in these areas. So I've highlighted two here that I particularly liked. One is from the NIHR, and it was Newcastle University project about AI and ML and DL. So these are, deep learning, machine learning, and artificial intelligence more broadly in healthcare technologies. Right, I've chosen this particular plot up here, which I realize will be very small for you. What I want to emphasize is what they did is they looked at what's kind of in use now in medical devices, and this big bar at the bottom is radiology. So they found just really a lot of AI use in what is, I would guess, mostly machine vision, computer vision stuff, processing images, and then less in other areas. Now this was from, I think, 2003, and so things will have changed quite a lot, actually, since then. But this report is out there, and I expect another one similar will exist soon. Now, I would say it says a horizon scanning report, but it mostly is, I don't know that it's scanning the horizon, it's kind of looking at what exists now, which of course is a good basis for this. Another article I read that I really liked, and again, I know the figure is very small. I just want you to see it, so if you see it again in the paper, it looks familiar, and you think, oh, Jess told me about that. Wasn't that helpful? It's this paper about AI use in conservation, which again is an area of use to us. And one of the valuable things I think they've done in this study is to kind of categorize the different types of contributions. So they've got this nice Venn diagram, love a Venn diagram, and it is a well-formed actual Venn diagram for those who care. So we've got kind of areas on the Venn diagram. The circles are things like the activity it's doing, understanding ecology, implementing solutions, identifying threats. But then within that, they've sort of characterized different possible AI contributions by how it would be contributing. So they've got the little brainy person thing is sort of, I really like this phrase, information that expands the scope of human imagination or creativity. Isn't that great? Let's have more of that. And then they've got kind of advanced analytic or simulation methods, and then more kind of AI agent things, where AI would share some insights with humans, right? And they kind of characterize those different possibilities by those. And this was more looking to the future and kind of generation after next technology. So this is a really interesting paper that I can recommend to you if you're interested in this kind of thing, okay? I made this figure bigger in the hopes it would be visible. It's not, so we're skipping it. This is a figure from another paper which will not be properly visible, but I also like this framework of how people were considering how AI is currently contributing to mechanistic modeling in epidemiology. Right? So this is mechanistic modeling. I mean some sort of model you've built where you understand the pieces of how it goes together. It's like an SAR model, a compartmental model, a mechanistic model. It can be stochastic, totally fine, but it's kind of, you've built it, it's understandable, you know the pieces, and how people are integrating various AI methods in different parts of that. So they made sort of this zoo description of different ways that people have done this. It's a Nature Comms paper, and I liked it. So it kind of says, well, there are, people sometimes use AI to generate the input to the method, or it might be that the mechanistic model includes parts inside it that are AI, or it might be that you use AI to put them together. So I really like this kind of taxonomy approach to help me at least think about what could this look like, right? So we have all these good principled things that people do. Let's just get out the crystal ball, shall we? The AI-generated image of a crystal ball, and see what we can think. I had really a lot of difficulty doing this because I'm a big sci-fi fan. I was worried I might be a bit too bonkers for the room. I'm willing to be like this much bonkers, but not this much. That's too much, right? They'll never invite me back, and I like you people and your fun conference and your nice dinner, and I want you to be willing to talk to me again. So I thought, okay, well, you know where I was last week? I was at one of the biggest AI conferences last week in the States. It's called Triple AI, and those last ones are for A and I. The previous two A's, I think. Oh, it says like Association for Advancement of AI, something like that. But it's huge. It's one of these like thousands of people, thousands of papers, and I would say a good 75% of attendees are properly on the AI hype train. Yeah, and so I thought, well, I have an afternoon where I'm walking around a poster session. I'm going to get out my clipboard. I brought a clipboard for this purpose. And I'm going to say, you don't know anything about veterinary public health or One Health, but you know a lot about AI. What do you think AI will be doing in these areas in the next, let's say, 20 to 30 years? I had a great time doing this and weirded just a lot of people out. It was really fun. So here are some things that they thought. And they are, I would say, probably be a little bit out there, and we're going to pull it back a little bit after this slide. So first they said, well, essentially all data analytics will be either entirely AI or AI augmented soon, either now or soon. Because in other areas, this is what's happening, right, in finance and these other sorts of places. They predicted like extreme levels of data monitoring and data gathering, kind of like, you know, a drone on every cow type of, like extreme monitoring. Things like a very large improvement in embodied AI in the next couple of years. Embodied AI here means an AI that is in something like a robot, right? Like, so we've got this robot up here. So AI being able to operate in the physical world is something it's not very good at right now. And that, I think, is a big jump that if it overcomes, then we'll see kind of large changes in who does what work, right? Because right now, physical work is a necessary part, particularly of agriculture, perhaps. They think they're now seeing licensing for AI medical assistance for humans, right? Already happening. And so I don't see why, if people are managing to do this for humans currently, we wouldn't start seeing it for veterinary practice as well. Because you would think, if anything, the kind of public resistance to being diagnosed by a chatbot is probably higher than the public resistance to cows being, or you know, other livestock being diagnosed by a chatbot, right? So in some ways, to them, this seems really mundane, right? Of course, we'll have this in the next 5 to 10 years, but I think to lots of us, this seems quite a big stretch, right? And I'm kind of interested in the tension there, right? Some people think basically any human job you can imagine will in the next 30 years be replaced by some sort of either physical or online AI. That's, I think, probably in that major societal change envelope where maybe we don't need to go there because that's so big that I can't really think about it. Another thing that came up repeatedly that I didn't expect was them suggesting that they might accelerate basic science in a way that wildly changes agriculture. So accelerating kind of various drug discovery things, production of artificial meat, all of these things, that these sorts of changes could make a big difference. But again, I kind of put that outside my envelope. Okay. So then I read some things and talked to some people, curated AI people think. So there was this panel called the Presidential Panel on the Future of AI, and they had a panel discussion, and I asked them questions, and they also generated a 91-page document, which I read for you, about what they think are the major trends in AI development in the near future. And they had just a ton of them, and I absolutely can't talk about all of them. But I picked out some that I thought might be particularly relevant for us that I'm gonna list on the next couple slides. So one was this question of a bunch of related things around the fact that, as we heard in our talk yesterday, we're seeing a lot more of what they're calling agentic AI or autonomous AI. And these are these sort of LLM-based things where you just say, do this task, and you don't really care how it does it, and you don't know how it's doing it. You can't explain or predict the answer. You don't know what's data it's used to do it, but it just does it. And if you're okay with the fact that you can't audit any of those things, then this is a useful system. But to what degree this is okay for us, I think is a big question. And I think to what degree this is okay for us, particularly looking 10 years in the future, where perhaps we see this a lot of places. It feels to me not okay now for lots of applications, but once I'm used to interacting with agentic AI everywhere, you know, instead of a GP receptionist and at my bank and with my students and all of these things, maybe it will start to feel more normal. And so where are we then? I think we need to think a lot about that. Embodied AI, I mentioned this important big jump. So if, you know, AI, it takes a big step forward in being able to operate in the physical world, which again, I think right now, spatial reasoning is not a strength of the LLMs. That will make a big difference, right? Then you'll get this inexplicably sinister, I don't know why AI gave me a really sinister looking robot, which is kind of directing an army of drones. I don't really know what that's about. But that could make a really big difference. And so whether we see that in the next 5 to 10 years, I guess, is maybe that's a checkpoint to watch out for, I guess, if we're horizon scanning for the impact on our systems. And the AI scientists are very concerned, I guess, that so much AI is now outside the realm of kind of the public sphere, right? So it used to be that most big AI research happened in universities, and so to some degree was public funded, and to some degree was publicly visible. But now a ton of that happens within big companies, where it's owned by particular large entities, and there's much less public scrutiny that's possible. Right? These companies are so big that, you know, they essentially sort of have more power than many nations, right? And so what does regulation mean in the context of that? I think that's a thing that we need to think about, right? I particularly wanted to highlight, I think in some cases I was very surprised in the last sort of 7 years to see medical data, NHS data being kind of held and owned with strong legal protection, but nevertheless by large overseas companies. I think that's a thing we should think about and decide whether we're worried about. Okay, so I asked AI people what they thought. I also asked AI what it thought. Right, so this is a chatbot's response to please make my talk. I'm at a loss, I'm very tired. What talk should I make? Now, here's the really sad bit. I asked it to do this after I'd made a talk, and this is essentially a superset of my initial talk, right? And that made me really sad, and so I binned my talk and made a new one and filled it with silly pictures, right? Because I thought, what is the point in me making a talk for you if you could just get it from ChatGPT? So I'm going to cast this as AI pushing my creativity because I wanted to do something more interesting than it. But it predicts kind of most of the sensible things that you might think and most of the kind of more conservative things. I also want to highlight that, in fact, it's more conservative than AI people. AI people predict these really large changes. An LLM predicts something quite conservative, really. And maybe that's because it's trained on past data. I don't know. All right, I'm out of time, so you won't get to enjoy these crazy pictures that I made, including a fake news article about this imagined future world, but I'll happily show them to you later anytime that you want. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jess. That was really interesting and entertaining. So any questions for Jess? Lisa?
I was really interested in what you're talking about, super forecasting, because I kind of wonder if we're there already, given that actually everyone has access to data and the control of those data are often in the hands of kind of individuals as opposed to sort of the population. But so my question really, when it comes back to where we are here in EPIC, if we're pulling the horizon forward to what we should be doing, if in order to do super forecasting, then the role of misinformation, disinformation becomes greater because actually the pool of data that are being used to train or inform super forecasting at crowd level matters, and the stories we tell ourselves matters. So is this an area that, you know, I guess in terms of the relationship between AI and the surveillance and detection and elimination of, instead of diseases, or we should be doing that around misinformation and disinformation if we're working into a world of AI and super forecasting. And then the second part is the thing that's quite interesting, I think, is around if we are going down that route, I suppose these training models perpetuate inequity because they're built on the foundation of information that was really sort of constructed through people and things that actually benefited from previous investment, and which itself I think is problematic. So it's just the second is more of a comment and the first is more of a question.
Okay, let me try and recall and correctly give some useful attempted an answer to those things. I think what you're asking me about is something like, if we're looking to do some super forecasting, then misinformation becomes extremely important because humans that have the wrong idea about, like factually the wrong idea about the world, I'm not making political judgments, though I could, they will probably incorrectly forecast. And if enough of them do it, then that's a problem, right? Okay, yeah. And their opinions, importantly, are not uncorrelated. And lots of these ideas around super forecasting assume that people's opinions and reasoning processes are uncorrelated and independent, which of course they're not, right? I also want to highlight that even if you're using LLMs or some artificial agent to do your super forecasting, of course this is just as important because those train on the internet, which is full of lies, as we all know, right? And so if you're looking to ask an LLM trained on a big data set for kind of a prediction into the future and it's seen a whole bunch of misinformation, that may well poison, we would call it poison, its training input. So I agree, those things are important if you're relying on those kinds of things. What you do about them, there I'm not particularly useful for you, I'm afraid.
I suppose the question was specifically in EPIC. You have skills to do surveillance, detection, elimination, eradication. You could apply those to information.
Oh, yes, you could.
Unit.
Yes.
And if you were thinking about a world where AI is taking over and actually moving towards that, is that an effective investment
Interesting.
to make?
Interesting. I don't know if it's an effective investment for Epic to make, but I do know that kind of on the more methodological side, you do see quite a lot of movement of researchers between the kind of, I think we just call them generically contagions, right? So whether it's a biological contagion, which is something like a disease, or whether it's an information contagion, the methods are often very similar. So I know that people do move between those research areas. Whether it's something that Epic would want to get into from a modeling perspective, this I can't comment on. I think there's a long history of scientists and modelers and government and policy and veterinarians especially doing a lot of kind of education. And I remember from the mists of time a presentation essentially telling me that what farmers believe their vet the most, and then the government not very much, and then the news somewhere in the middle, something like that. And so information that is correct coming from voices that people trust is very important, and I kind of wanted to highlight that that's a thing that has existed and obviously needs to continue to exist, even more in a situation where you're doing some sort of group forecasting. Yeah.
Hi, Jess. George Russell, Morgan.
Hi.
One of the things we heard yesterday was that, and you alluded to the cost of AI today, was that none of the big companies who run these enormous data stores and processing actually have made any money yet. When you went to the conference, did you get a flavour of whether or not AI was heading for an enormous crash, or whether there was going to be a use case that was actually going to make somebody some money?
Good question, yeah. If I knew that, I could probably leverage it into enormous wealth. So perhaps I wouldn't tell you, but I don't know, which is also exactly what I would tell you if I did know. No, but more seriously. So I suppose as a like semi-outsider to the AI community, because what I do is now kind of AI, because kind of everything is kind of AI, right? But my training is not in artificial intelligence. It is a bit, unnervingly bubble-like, right? It feels, as an outsider, a little bit culty, this kind of thing. But that's also what it would look like if it were about to be enormously effective in changing the world, right? So kind of from a, like, if I think about different trajectories of the world and timelines, the one where it's about to be amazing and the one where it's about to crash kind of look the same right now. And so I have difficulty knowing for sure, or even at all, which it's going to do. Whether anybody's going to make money off it, I mean, I will say that if someone's going to find a way to make money off it, I would guess that your enormous corporate entities from the United States are going to be the ones to find it, right? So the fact that I can't find a way to make money off it, I think, is no evidence that Google won't, in brief, yeah. Go away? Okay, yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jess. That was really interesting.